Hello, and welcome to I Wonder, Assessing Prior Knowledge and Fostering Problem Solving with ClassPad.net. My name is Amy Chow, and I will be your moderator tonight with this on-demand learning that we are doing now. And presenting for us is Karen Greenhouse.
Hi there, I'm Karen, and I'll let you guys read the little blurb there for both Amy and myself, but we basically do these together and we're just here to share some ideas. And today I'm going to be sharing using ClassPad.net. So bear with me for just a second while I go to that screen. So ClassPad.net is a free math software. It does pretty much any kind of math you want. And here's the landing page. You guys can go explore it on your own. One of the things, if you've never used it before, is hit the start exploring and it just lets you start playing. And you can basically do graphing and calculations. And if you look at this image here, financial things. So lots of things we're doing. I'm going to be using two activities that I basically took ideas from NCTM's Problems of the Week, and I've converted them into an activity that I made. The activity is shared in the little description of this video and URLs, and that means you can open them up and start playing with them. But if you are interested in ClassPad.net from this learning experience, just a couple things to note before I forget, that you can go into the training, you can go into the activities, and basically there's how-to videos, there's mini math lessons, there's so much there for you to do. So try to explore that as well. So there's the link again, ClassPad.net. So I'm going to go into two activities that I created. And the idea of today is how can you use students' prior knowledge, or how can you even assess where they are through problem solving? So instead of assuming they know something or assuming they don't know something, how could you use problem solving to figure that out? So I have two problems that I'm going to do. So the first one I want to look at is sort of more towards, say, elementary, middle school. And it's about, in the content wise, it's about area, volume, length, those types of things. So you're probably thinking upper elementary, early middle school here. And this problem, if you look over here to the right, this is in a geometry sticky. Those of you not used to ClassPad, this is a geometry sticky. If I click it, you'll see I have all these geometry tools, but I like to use it because in ClassPad.net, you can insert images. So I took a picture of the NCTM problem. So you'll notice that here's what is the word I'm looking for, Amy?
Oh, I can't.
I'm giving them credit.
Yes.
So I didn't make this problem up. It came from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Here's the link if you want to look for the problems of the week. So this is a scenario, and I basically just took a picture of it and put it up here so I didn't have to retype it. And it has some nice little images. So this is just an example of how you can embed images into ClassPad.net. And if I could do math on top of it. We're not doing that right now, but just to show you. And so you'll notice a lot of the problems of the week that NCTM presents don't have any questions. So the first thing I would have the students do is read this. I might read this out loud. And I like to start problem solving with noticings and wonderings. So there's no questions. It just kind of says, what do you notice? What's happening? And this really helps students kind of think about what is the math that might be going on here? What could I maybe figure out? What am I interested in based on the situation? And in these noticing wonderings, you can already sort of assess where they are. So basically this is a garden, and they talk about how they made the garden last year a really skinny garden. So it was against a 30-foot fence. So they didn't have to actually build a fence there. And then they netted just 3 sides. So if you think about that, this is perimeter that we're talking about, and it's also area because they're telling us it was 30 feet by 1. And then this year they decided they're going to move the garden. So now we're going to get it away from that permanent fence and create a 6 by 8. So that changes not only the perimeter, but the area, and it's those types of things. So if we were to have students read this, we talk about it, I would want them to do some noticings and wondering. So what do you notice? So just off the top of my head, one of the things as a teacher, I would hope that they notice is that it's 2 different sized gardens, right? So we have the nice thing about ClassPad, these 2 stickies right here, one is aqua because I changed its color. They're just text stickies where I can type. So I tend to make activities where my directions or my questions are in one color, and students are always going to be answering in another text sticky in a different color. So they get in the habit of realizing whenever they see that yellow, I tend to use yellow for whatever reason, but that yellow sticky is where they're going to write their understandings, write down their descriptions, their explanations, their justifications. So it says in the sticky to the right, write anything you notice. So I'm just going to write a couple things. So maybe they notice it's 2 gardens. So one is 30 by 1 and the other is 6 by 8, right? So that's 2 things. What other things might they notice? Maybe they don't actually notice it, but they're like, well, it sort of seems like these might be rectangular.
Right. I was going to say that next.
Right.
Yep.
And Amy, what might be something else they might notice? If we're thinking about perimeter, the first fence, so the netting has to go around, right? So they're trying to keep deer out.
So the netting is only going around 3 sides on the first fence. And then on the second garden, it's going to go around all 4 sides.
So we have a different amount of netting that's going to be happening to begin with. All right. So you can keep going. And students, keeping in mind, sometimes they notice things that we may not think of, but here's some main things that we might notice. So what are some things wondering? This is where I like that the question is left off, because this gets the students thinking about, based on what I know, what could I find an answer to? So, and they also have other wonderings that might come, like when will the deer come, like things that are not necessarily relevant to solving, but, but one of the wonderings is, how much netting do I need? Is the netting the same amount? Like, could I use the netting from last year? So I'm not going to go through all the wonders, but the idea here is getting them focused. And based on this, if they can't come up with any noticings, if they don't understand rectangular, maybe you can have a discussion, you've assessed, say, oh, these kids may need to think about shapes first before we get into the problem. We can talk about what shape could this mean if it's giving you 2 dimensions. Could it be a square, or things like that. So you're assessing what they know, and then let's move on. So then the next thing in this activity, so here's what I like about these activities is, and using ClassPad, this is why I use ClassPad, is because I can have lots of things going on and just scroll to the next thing. So everything's in one place. So it says here, use whatever tools you need, geometry, calculations, to help you answer the following questions. And so here's my questions now. So these questions did come from this problem, but they're left off. They actually appear in the student work. So first question, which is an obvious one, and maybe we didn't put it in our wonderings, what is the area? Right? So the first question is, how much larger is the area of my garden this year than it was last year? So here is now an example of an image. So I just went and found a picture of some grass with a permanent fence to represent this situation, a 30-foot wooden fence, right? So the first garden, it said, was 30 feet long and 1 foot wide. So here's the first garden, which is really a ridiculous garden.
At least according to that image.
I mean, this image it is technically to scale, but it's like a really ridiculous, garden. But now, so here's this. So then you could have the students, okay, so if this is the garden, what's one of the first things they could do? And they could pull up a calculate sticky. So those of you not familiar with ClassPad, if I want to do a calculation or anything else, all I do is click on a blank spot, and here's my options, and I want to get a calculator out. And I can move this where I want. So I'm just gonna leave it here right now. So they might say, well, let's figure out what last year's was. If I know that I need to find area, and let's say the students don't know what to do, maybe they start adding 31 plus 30 plus 1. That tells you, oh, they don't really understand what area is. They're doing perimeter. But they're going to do 30 times 1. So the first garden is, so then they could write over here, first garden is 30 times 1, which is 30 square feet, right? So how big is the second garden? And if they can't quite visualize it, they could go back up. Well, it's supposed to be 6 by 8. So let's change this and notice that my garden, oh, it did tell me how to move these. I'm going to move the garden and make it be, what was it? 6 by
8.
8.
Yeah.
There's 8.
8.
I forget which ones I did to move the, obviously I'm using the wrong ones. There we go. 6 by 8. So this is what my new garden looks like. It's a very different garden. It looks, is it bigger? Well, it's hard to tell. Well, what's the area of this? So now they could do, if they can't do that in their head, 6 times 8. Why is it? Oh, because I didn't use an actual 6.
Yeah.
I used an X.
You used an X instead
Show
of
me.
the multiplication.
48. So the second garden is actually larger. It has more space inside the fencing, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to write this down. And so then now they're going to answer it. The second garden is bigger. And how much more area is it? Well, 48 subtract 38, 18 more square feet. So I have a lot more garden space doing it this shape, right? So then the next obvious question, my garden's larger. And so I'm going to go get netting. How much more should I buy? So now the question is, what kind of problems are we doing now? Well, now we're doing perimeter. And you could ask the students, well, which one's going to have a larger perimeter? And they're probably going to say the second one because it has a larger area, right? So this is an interesting question because what do you have to remember about the first one? The first one had netting. If we go back to our noticings,
only on 3 sides.
it only had netting on 3 of the sides,
Right.
and what were those 3 sides? Well, if we went back to our picture, I probably should have done 2 different gardens, but it was one 30-foot side didn't have any netting on it. So I had a 30-foot side plus
and 2 1-foot
1.
sides.
So I had a 32. So I had 30 plus 1 plus 1 equals 32 feet of netting for this first garden. And then the second garden, I'm doing
So 6
2
plus,
times 6, and you could have them doing it different ways,
right?
exploring how they understand, perimeter. And I actually need less netting. Okay, so then that's giving them a really nice, and it's because I used one side didn't have netting. So all these different things that you're exploring, you're able to use images, you're able to use, what do they understand about area, about perimeter? And then we move to the last question. And so notice here, there's a yellow box where they're supposed to be doing all their work. The last question, this is still a geometry sticky, and I used an isometric grid here to kind of give a 3D. It's talking about how they're going to, this is an extra. Problems of the week from NCTM always have an extra, which is a great way to differentiate in your classroom. If you have students who are doing things, faster than others or kind of understanding, you can give them the extra to explore because they tend to be ones that are a little bit more challenging for the level. But this is talking about, okay, so I've got my garden, my 6 by 8 foot garden, and I want 6 inches of garden to lay my thing. What's the volume of that? And so they can adjust this to match the situation and figure out volume. So how high does this need to be? And how am I going to figure out the volume of that? How many cubic feet? So that's volume. So just an extension going from, area to perimeter to volume.
Volume at the end. Yeah.
So that's this first activity. And again, when you are working in ClassPad.net, you create an activity or you find an activity, you can share it with your students. And I'm going to share this with you by going to the 3 dots up here, which are for settings, and go to the share button. And this is a public share. So this activity is available publicly. And you just copy the URL, put it in your email, put it on your website, put it on your Google Classroom, whatever. And kids just click it and they open this activity and can work on it. So there's lots of how-tos on our YouTube about, sharing and stuff with students. So I'm going to move to the second one, which is more of an algebraic. So kind of a little bit higher level. This one I would say is more towards the upper elementary, middle school. And this next one, again, also from NCTM. This is more about like systems of equations and comparing constant rates and equations, depending where they are. But remember, we're assessing prior knowledge at this point. So this is a cell phone comparing 2 different cell phones deals. And again, National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Here's where you can find those problems of the week. And so I just copied it, put it up here. So we have 2 different companies offering 2 different rates or charges for their phone service. So 700 minutes, if you notice. So when I ask students to notice, so what do they notice? Well, both companies start at 700 minutes, right? So that's starting out equal. And then if they talk more than 700 minutes, there's different charges. So this first company is charging 6 cents a minute, and the next one's charging 35 cents a minute, but they have a smaller monthly fee. And this one has a larger monthly fee. And so basically, in their wonderings, what might be a question they ask? The obvious one is, which company should you go with, right? But that's really not an obvious question because it really depends, right? So these are the kinds of interesting wonderings. You know, is one offer better than the others? Well, it depends how many minutes you talk. And you can have these great conversations, but noticings and wonderings are a great way for them to start thinking about questions they would ask. And based on those questions, what do I have to do? What do I have to figure out? So if I know I'm going to talk only 700 minutes, the answer right now would be obvious. Which one?
Oh, it would be singular.
Singular, because if I'm only going to talk 700 minutes, I'm only paying $29.99.
Yep.
Whereas I'm paying $45.99. So
yeah,
it leads them into, but does everyone know they're going to only talk this certain number of minutes? I know I don't. I have unlimited because I talk way more than that, but you know.
Right.
In all honesty, I guess companies still do have these, right? I mean, there are companies that charge you per minute, but
yeah, but most plans are now unlimited.
So I don't, oh, this was for something later, so I want to get rid of that, but I forgot I changed my table because I added something on later. So we'll just ignore this 500 right now, but this was actually a table that started with 700. So one of the things I love about ClassPad is that I can do that multiple representations and have students kind of figure out, this is part of that assessing, how would you approach this? And depending on the level of students, some of them will want to start with a table and start trying to, you know, let's just go up to a certain amount and compare them that way. And that's good for a certain amount of time. But notice I start with one, so it's pretty easy, $45.99. The first one is $45.99. And then for every minute, so at 7:01, I'm going to have to add in 0.06, right? So this one, standard is not the right one. But here at this point, I now have 46.05. And at the same 1 minute, I really could just add 6 cents here, but we'll let the calculator do it.
Is it 6 cents or is it?
Oh, wait, you're right.
30.
It was 35
cents. 35 cents. Yeah.
All right. So I couldn't do that in my
Well, you probably could, but.
So, you know, they could do that. So notice I just have it up and then I jump from 5 to 20 and then 20 to 50. And so at this point, you're hoping that they are figuring out some kind of, you know, expression. That's even one of that's one of the questions over here is, you know, yes, use your calculator, but after a while, it's going to be really tedious doing it one at a time. So how are you going to figure out, like at 720 and at 750 and at 775 and 800, and you're hoping they come up with those expressions that they can now use. And so for Horizon, what would that expression be? Well, it's what was it? $45.99, right? Plus 0.06 for every minute, right? Right.
But over, does it matter that it's 700? Do we need to do the mathematics there?
Oh, so yeah, what do you want to, I mean,
or are we just assuming that we're
just going to assuming they're starting with,
so then it's just for every minute. So then it would be
just
X.
an X.
Yeah.
And then here, or so, but if we did, that's a great question, actually. And so I guess it would depend on the level of your student.
Right.
So
then I would assume that it would be 0.06 times the quantity 700 minus X. or X minus 700.
I think it's X
X minus
700,
700.
right?
Sorry. Yeah. Because it would
I
be
think
over.
it would be X minus 700
Mhm.
because it's the minutes over. So I kind of like that. We're going to do it. But you know what? You could have,
But then it doesn't really help because,
no, because it doesn't, it's really the minutes over.
yeah, it's
So
so then
I
we
think
just
I
have to
like
do the
X better.
mathematics, just X. Yeah.
I think X is
So
better.
we're just assuming that everything
It's
is
starting at 700.
700.
All right. So then this one was what? 29.99
999
plus 0.35
0.35
times X, right?
Yeah.
So they're coming up with that. So if I am, so they are subtracting. So what could we do here? Maybe we could change it to basically take off the 700 and make it 0, 1, 2, 5,
Mhm.
right? If we wanted to change our table a little bit. So they've come up their expressions. So then you'll notice that the next thing is, okay, so use your equations and graph those equations. And so now we can go from a table representation and maybe some manual calculations to let's look at the graph to help us answer these more complex. So now I would have them type in, oh, you know what? I did do 700 here, didn't I? I'm just looking at my scale. My scale's not going to be right unless I do 700, right?
Mm,
Or is it?
yeah, your scale's not right because, well, go back down to your X.
Where are we?
Go to your graph. Sorry.
If X is my minutes, I need it to be a 700. So this scale, I was using this scale with this being the X because I was going to use this as my scatter plot.
So then we would have
So
to
we
change
would have to do
the values of, well, no, it would just probably be easier if you
just change these.
change those to 0, 1, 2. Yeah. The other thing though is then if you talk about,
Oops. I forgot what I just did.
you did was 0, 1, 2, 5,
20, right?
20, 25.
No, I think I did
Or was 50?
50.
Did you do 75 after
And then
that?
I did 75. There we go.
And then you need to change the 800 to 100.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, you would have to,
confusing, yeah.
yeah. So you would have to make sure that our students would have to make sure to know that we're talking about the minutes over. And
I'm going into the settings of the graph because it should change it automatically. Oops. So let's go back. So then that will change. It won't change our.
We won't change the equation as long as we are under the assumption that X is any value greater than.
It didn't auto do it. I want it to go up to what?
We could just do like 300 maybe.
200
or 300. Yeah, 200, 300.
by. There we go.
Yeah.
And then my second one was.
Yeah, so the assumption is that X is the number of minutes over 700.
Over 700, yeah. So we should probably write that on ours. So now, once you have it graphed, you can do your calculators. How many total minutes of calls per month is Horizons Plan a better deal? Explain. So this is now about comparing the equations and comparing the graphs, coming up with ways to find that solution. So you'll notice on ClassPad, and I'm going to change this to have decimal. So that's settings. So at this point, what does that point mean? Well, it means at 55 minutes, so 755 minutes, 0.17 and 49.3. So does that make sense in minutes? When they're exactly the same. And so how would you answer a question here? How many total minutes of calls per month is Horizons Plan a better deal? And Horizon is this first one, and which is in blue. So it's a better plan. It's a better plan up until
no, it's the opposite, right?
Oh, it's the opposite. I'm sorry. It's a better plan. It's a better plan after?
Yes. Right, because then it's cheaper.
but this is the cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, I'm looking at the blue line. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
looking at the red line. God, confusing myself. Thank God Amy is on. So yeah, so they're looking at the blue line is the horizon, and up here it's higher, it costs more. So it's
Mhm.
not a good deal at the beginning, but then once you hit over
after
55, after
55,
55, right? Pretty close. You're gonna want to go with that. So then you can talk about how do you decide, is there a point in time where the cost is equivalent? That's right here. Does that make
Mhm.
sense at 55.1 cents? Can you have 0.17 of a minute? What would that mean? You talked for a few seconds.
Yeah. Right.
So that's
a
one
good,
way.
that's
and
another conversation to have. Like how do they
Right.
round that, right? So are we sticking to the traditional rounding rules? So if you go 55.5 and then it's automatically 56. So yeah, great conversations to have additionally.
So the extra, remember I was talking about in the previous thing that all the problems of the weeks always have extra things. This is adding a challenge. This is now, suppose a third company offers a plan that's $49 for 500 minutes. So right away, it's not a great plan if you're going to talk 700 minutes, right?
Right.
So you can always say, but it only charges 2 cents after for a minute. So then the question is it ever the best deal? Would this plan ever be better than these original two? Like how long is it going to take before it is a better deal, or is it ever going to be a better deal? And so that's where I was adding in this 500. And what I wanted to point out in this, we're not going to actually go through it because, there's lots of ways to approach it. But the nice thing about ClassPad is everything is connected. So even though this is a new table, because I used the same headings, anytime I add anything here, so this would actually be, this is where I don't know that I like.
Yeah, we'd have to
because
figure
we'd
that
have to
out.
do negative numbers, right?
Right.
So I'd have to figure out. I think you're right, though. I think up here it would have been 700 minus X.
Or X, yeah.
Right? Because if X is the minutes over 700.
It would be X minus 700.
I mean, X
you would
minus
want
700,
positive. But
yeah.
even then, if you're doing, it would be hard because
it would be, this one, because it doesn't start at 5. Yeah. So this would be a really challenge because now it's not the same start thing. So then how do you count the 700 in there? Or you would just change.
You'd have to change up the equations a
You'd
little
have to
bit.
change the equations. So anyway, but what I like is like if I add something here, like 510, notice it adds it up here as well. So everything is talking in ClassPad.net, so you don't have to redo things. And one of the things that you could have done before you go right to equations, you could have also, if I had done this, now it's not going to make any sense right now, but I could have done a scatter plot. So notice when I click the tables in ClassPad, I now could have done a scatter plot too. Now I'm going to just do it and it's going to look ridiculous on the graph. But here's my scatter plot. It's got the 2 points that are there. There's nothing for this one. So, but it would have had all the points. And then you could have figured out using, if you didn't want to just go from the equation from the table, you could have gone from a graph and then use 2 points to find the slope and things like that. So that might be another way to approach it. So that's the beauty of ClassPad. You can actually let students, like if you just let them go, let them figure out what makes sense to them. Maybe they only want to stick with the table and calculations, or maybe they want to do a scatter plot and do calculations that way, or maybe they just want to go right to an equation and use the graphs. So that's the nice thing about this is you get a sense of what students know and what they don't know by what they've decided to do to help solve this problem. And I find that that's a really great insight into what students already know. And then that gives you insight on what you might need to review or not review, or how you can, group the students and say, this group didn't understand constant rates. So I'm going to spend a little more time with them, but this group's ready to go on to something else. So nice ways to use ClassPad and problem solving to get a sense of what your kids know or don't know and how you can support them. So that's all I wanted to share today. And again, both these activities have URLs that I'm going to put in the description below. And that means you can just open them up and you'll see them undone. Like there's no work on them. And when you get to that point, when you open it, if you have an account, and accounts on ClassPad.net are completely free for students, for you. If you open an activity in your account, you'll see this little icon up here, which is called the duplicate. And that means anything you've found in the public share domain that you like, if you hit duplicate, it makes a copy into your own folder, and then you have it to use and change and modify however you see fit. So that's one of the nice things about ClassPad. There's hundreds of activities that Cassio's done and created, and that other users have created, that you can just basically, I don't want to say steal. That sounds, it's not stealing. It's borrowing and modifying. So you're not reinventing you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just taking something and making it fit your needs. And so that's a really nice feature of ClassPad. And I'm going to switch back to presentation here and just end things. Thanks for watching. We are doing on-demand learning opportunities now because we think that just fits better with everyone's schedules these days. So just make sure you look for new activities, new webinars, new things like that on our social media. And if you have any questions, something you'd like to see, that would be really nice too, because we're always looking for ideas of what we want to do next on demand. So email us with your ideas and suggestions. And thanks, Amy, for catching my math mistakes.
No.
So
we're here to support each other. Thank you guys for your time. And we hope you watch one of our additional videos.
That's right. We've got lots of them. Thanks.